Um, okay, so, well, welcome to today. It's the second of a series in the kind of showcasing this year's shortlisted projects from the National Urban Design Awards. You may have seen the last session, which was about small master plans, was a couple of weeks ago. Today, we are going to look at the larger master plan projects. And there are three other master classes going to come. One about design coding on the Tuesday, the 26th of October, September, 26th of September. Then we've got the 2nd of October, where we talk about the completed projects, the shortlisted ones. And then on the 25th of October, we talk about policy, strategy, and design guides. And it has been a long process in terms of your submissions, the shortlisting, and now today showcasing the shortlist and then announcing the winner for the category as well. On our conference on the 12th and 13th of October, we want to kind of celebrate all the achievements and, you know, the good urban design in person. So we really hope to see you there. As many as possible of you, and also representatives of the shortlisted schemes, because it would be nice to kind of celebrate in person and not just on the screen. For those that haven't met me, I'm Katja Stille. I'm director at Tibbetts Planning Urban Design and a former chair of the Urban Design Group. And I will be the chair today, but mostly it is about hearing from our shortlisted schemes and, well, being inspired and learn as well from maybe some of the challenges that they have faced, because doing really good things isn't always the easiest thing to do. But before we start, a big thank you also to the team internally in the Urban Design Group, to Lynn and Alan and Robert, who've done a lot of work behind the scenes, and all the judges and everybody who was involved. And the final judges for this category were Roger Evans, Victoria Lee, and Dr. Deb Abdahir. So really good, and thank you for all the hours they've put in and kind of sifting through the material and having discussions and debates. Today we will have 10-minute presentations from all the shortlisted projects. And then for each one, we have also around 10 minutes question and answer. So you have a chance to kind of ask the teams directly anything you want to know about those projects. So I think we start off with the first presentation is from Charlotte Lewis. It's about from Richborough, and it's about land north of Merley, Poole. And Oakwood Park, I think it's kind of like is the name of that master plan. And it is really kind of, I think what the judges commented on was that it is a scheme where over half of the site will be opened up to as publicly accessible green space, in new sung and wetland meadows on the doorstep, and also the integration of the kind of the landscape infrastructure, communal food areas, and also responsiveness to its unique landscape setting. So yeah, Charlotte, over to you.
Hello everyone. Right, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can see. Can you see?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we can.
Fantastic. So hello everyone. I'm Charlotte Lewis. I'm design director at Richborough. Our site is located in Poole, Dorset. It's a stone's throw away from the wonderful Carrotswell market town of Wimborne. It sits on the existing residential edge of two neighbourhoods, Oakley and Merley, which are these areas here, which are focused around a small local centre and a school. So these areas once formed part of the Canford estate, which makes up most of the Canford village. And that area is focused around Oakley Manor, Canford Manor House, which is a collection of grade 1 and 2 listed buildings that is now currently occupied by Canford School. And then beyond that, you have the River Stour that flanks the sort of northern edge of the site, and you have the Stour Valley Park beyond. So a little bit about the site. It's a greenfield site. It was promoted by Richborough and released from the Greenbelt. It's roughly 46 hectares, and it was allocated for residential use, a minimum of 500 dwellings, a care home, and sang. We submitted an outline application, and that was underpinned by a master plan and a design code, and we obtained outline planning consent last year. So the site's effectively bookended by two conservation areas, one to the east and one to the west. This is the built-up edge of Merley, which is suburban and low density, and it turns its back on the site. The A31 is elevated. It's a trafficked route above the site, below which you have the river Stour and the associated flood zones, which affect the sort of bottom part of the site. In front of which there is a wonderful treed carriage drive that was a former private route to the now Camford School, and that is now a public right-of-way which crosses the site and leads directly into Wimborne, where there is an array of local shops and facilities there. Other considerations is that the site has a challenging topography in certain areas in the centre. There are services beneath it that you wouldn't ordinarily know about. And there are a series of lovely trees and hedgerows, some of which are veteran. A little snapshot about the context. So the images on the left here show Camford Village, wonderful arts and crafts buildings, rural character landscape led. This is the approach into Camford School by the side of the site. These are locally regarded cottage pairs known as Lady Wimborne cottages, which have a distinctive buff brick, very sort of Gothic style arched windows and a sort of gable front design. And then along the carriage drive here, you have a wonderful Victorian suspension bridge, which gives way to the Stour Valley Park. This is the carriage drive with the site on the left-hand side rising above it. And this is a wonderful gateway bridge known as the Lady Wimborne Bridge, which signifies the entrance into the carriage drive as you move off the streets that lead into Wimborne. So lots for us to go away and think about with our design. And this is our design, which accords with policy. And the vision was always about how the design stitched into its surroundings, creating a new place that related as closely as it possibly could to the character and the landscape character of the site. So the street design is pretty much founded on an organic deformed layout, and it aims to create a well-connected, safe and attractive environment that all funnels movement and that sort of cycle and pedestrian movement down to the carriage drive, which pretty much acts as the linchpin for the overall movement and green space strategy. The layout and the patterning of development is founded upon best practice urban design principles, so it's block structure really, and aims to create a series of locally inspired development character areas that stitch into the setting of the site and its surroundings. But inclusivity is at the very heart of this scheme. Its size and its scale affords the opportunity to increase local housing choice, affordability, and mixed tenure housing, including care, adaptable housing, self-build plots, provides for people at every stage of life. And so this is all predicated and founded on an extensive new parkland and sang, which opens up the site to existing residents and new, and fosters community spirit. So a series of green corridors stem from Oakley Lane, from the existing neighbourhoods, and give way to a new neighbourhood park, children's play, nature trails, communal food-going areas, ensuring that access to green space and nature is easy and meaningful. So we developed a series of parameter plans and structuring plans as part of the outline work. These were discussed and evolved through a series of sessions with the local authority, local members, public consultation, and we also undertook independent design review. And those parameters were then internally tested through a series of proving layouts to make sure that the design was the best it could be, it was most responsive, but appropriately it also worked from a volume house building perspective. And this was all done pre-National Model Design Code guidance. Those parameters are up tip into a structuring plan. So this is a regulating plan, which captures the placemaking principles and all the parameters. And the areas that I'm going to focus on today are the sort of 4 coloured areas, which are the identity areas. These are extracts from the design code. So each chapter details built form and landscape together. And it uses a series of sketches and annotations and lots of precedent images to convey the functionality of each character area, its response to its context, and also its role as part of the overall master plan. And so the area that I'm going to talk about first is called Crux de Mede. It's the purple area that responds to the conservation area over here. It's the mid to high density area, which provides a series of gateways. The emphasis is on family housing, and it takes cues from the hinterland around the more historic parts of Poole and Wimborne. And it's all focused around a central formal tree-lined street, which gives way to a series of side streets, mews and edge lanes. And the streets are punctuated at a series of points with widenings that create a series of informal parks, greens and squares. So a traditional vernacular is in mind for this area, using varied building designs so that the townscape dominates and buildings lead the way as you move from one part to another. And then along the edges, we identify opportunities for landscape restoration. There are some areas that remain from the agricultural uses associated with the site, which could be enhanced and drawn into new green spaces. And we identify the opportunity for new built form to replicate some of the architectural forms of the Lady Wimborne cottage styles around. So you can see that the imagery and the diagrams all relate as much to landscape as they do as built form. The next area is an area called Oakley Lane Formal. This relates to Merley. It takes cues from the sort of formality of the historic parts of Georgian and Victorian architecture in Wimborne and Poole. And it creates a series of additional gateways that tie up with streets to the Crux de Mede character area, with more continuous frontages, and certainly an active frontage onto Oakley Lane Formal, with key building groups and perhaps some taller buildings that define a series of entry points. And having lots of entry points into the scheme was important for us because we wanted it to be as permeable as possible, but also entry points are helpful from a delivery and a phasing perspective too. And so the density sort of degrades as it comes into the centre of the site, where it overlooks a new treed glade. And that glade soaks up an awkward level change as part of the green infrastructure and creates a natural break to a new character area in front of it, which addresses the character of the carriage drive. Which leads me on to that. This is the Stour Valley Edge. So this is a response to the carriage drive and the Riverside setting beyond it. It takes cues from the St John's area of Wimborne, with references to the Camford estate threaded throughout it. And it creates a semi-rural setting by way of more loosely arranged blocks with sylvan views of the carriage drive. Green mews across the development blocks on a sort of range on a north-south axis, allowing street trees to permeate through the area and then relate to the parkland setting that surrounds it. And so key features of this space includes a crescent-style space which envelops a series of veteran trees next to the carriage drive, streets that give way to views of the carriage drive, quiet edge lanes with generous frontages for landscape, but also a very meaningful landscape buffer along the full length of that carriage drive, which is opened up for pedestrian and cycle access, and features a secondary avenue of trees, which protects and safeguards that tree character of the heritage assets. And so the last area that I'll describe is the Camford Magna interface. This is the area next to the school, and it's all very much hinged on the provision of a series of very well-considered buffers. These were tested through discussions with Historic England that create an appropriate edge treatment to the carriage drive, the school, and the edge of the conservation area. And so a curved Dorset terrace leads you into the central part of the site, which is terminated with a view of a new Lady Wimborne cottage pair, from which a series of quiet lanes branch off. And so this area is aiming to create an arts and crafts style frontage to Oakley Lane, car-free frontages that complement the buffers to the carriage drive and the approach into the school, and a series of splayed building lines that incorporate views of existing Lady Wimborne cottages into new streets and open spaces. And just to finally conclude, we produced a series of watercolours to assist our discussions with Historic England. These are some of them. This is the Camford Magna area I've just described, showing the curved Dorset terrace and how Lady Wimborne cottage adaptations could be incorporated into a new parkland. And this is the carriage drive alongside it. So these were really helpful for discussions with local with members and the planning authority. This is a view of the Stour Valley edge I've described in front of the carriage drive, and you can see the secondary avenue just behind it, with the frontage very much being subservient to the sort of landscape features that define it. This is the view from within the site, and because part of the edge and the buffer to the carriage drive envelops a series of flood zones, we created a series of ponds and basins with a series of pontoons and boardwalks that allowed that area to be used when it was more wet, with again a lovely frontage featuring Canford estate architecture in the vernacular. And then finally, just a view of a pocket park in the crux of the Mead area, the first area I described, all focused around a really lovely oak tree. And you can see the traditional vernacular is reflected in these buildings here. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for talking us through the kind of project and your submission. Anyone else in the audience, please do add questions to Charlotte into the chat as well. I mean, there's one question that was from the judges, actually, and they have said, I mean, they've wondered how you're going to take this forward once it has outline planning. So who's going to deliver it, is responsible for the delivery of this vision and the quality, and also who will look after the landscape in the future?
Yeah.
Do you have answers to those questions already?
Yeah, so after the outline planning consent was granted, Carla Holmes were appointed development partner and have since acquired the site. Their scheme is currently awaiting determination for reserve matters approval. Whilst I don't have them here to share with you, we're really pleased about how the designs have really captured the essence of the placemaking principles of this scheme of Oakwood Park, how they flowed through into the detailed design. And what was really important for us as part of the design coding is that we didn't fix everything at the outline stage. In some instances, certain individuals were pushing for that because of the landscape and heritage sensitivities, but we felt it was important for the coding to provide designers at the reserved detailed matters stage a degree of flexibility to explore alternative designs that might work in a better way. And I think that's really come through successfully through the designs we've seen so far by Carla Holmes.
Okay, there's a related question, and then Jim Selby, I will come back to yours. There's a question from Jonathan whether the land transfer is conditional on the formal compliance with the design code.
Say that again, sorry, Katja.
Is the land transfer with your preferred development partner, is that conditional on the compliance with the design code? So has the design code be written into the, I guess, the legal?
Well, the design code is an approved, the document as part of the outline consent. So by that very nature, the design has to adhere to the green space and built form principles set within it.
Yeah, and there's always lots of discussion about design coding and how to control it, whether it's controlled by the land or by planning, but that clarifies that question. There's another one from Jim Selby about, he's asking, how is the Sang accessed?
How is the
Sang accessed?
Oh, Sang, okay. So there was a requirement for the Sang to come forward at the earliest stage of the development. So I think it's first dwelling occupancy. The Sang is accessed via a green corridor link that stems from Oakley Lane. I'll just show you actually. Okay, so this area here flows from the Oakley Lane down towards the carriage drive. And so streets deliver a Sang car park, and then you use the carriage drive and the public right of way to access the Sang, which is this area here.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Jim? I take that as a yes.
I hope so.
Are there any other questions from the group? I mean, otherwise I would kind of ask, so what was in this project your biggest challenge in terms of creating and taking forward the vision?
I think
and the quality you're seeking.
I think two things. You know, the concept, agreeing the approach with Historic England was a key part, and we involved them at every stage. But it took some negotiation, and it was fairly difficult sometimes, because this is an outline scheme, and just where you draw the line on detail, and how relevant that level of detail is to demonstrating that your principles are right for context was sometimes a struggle. And we felt that the outline scheme was being drawn into unnecessary levels of detail that might be restrictive for designers at the reserve matters stage. But in the end, it was about a balance, and it worked out okay. But it was quite a drawn out process.
Okay. And another question from Nick. It's about a kind of sustainable transport strategy, and what measures have you put in place to mitigate car dependency?
Yeah, so the idea is to use the parkland as a way of encouraging active modes of travel. So within all the green links and along the main primary street, there is a cycleway. And they connect with the carriage drive, which itself is already a prow and was proposed to be enhanced to accommodate pedestrians and cyclists. And then at the front of the site, where those green corridors lead in and connect with the carriage drive, we proposed a bike hire scheme, like a barrel bikes hire scheme, so that people could move around and choose to use cycles, you know, really easily.
Okay, thank you. And another one from Angela. And Angela would like to know how you secured the typologies, especially the terrace housing. I mean, sometimes that can be a challenge to kind of get new terrace housing built.
Yeah, so the typologies of housing weren't fixed. So each character area explains the density approach and the intent, that the response to context and its role as part of the overall master plan, but it shows a series of building types that could form part of that context, and it's using precedent images to show how they might translate themselves as part of a detailed design. But the onus is at the detailed design to show how those terraces might manifest themselves.
But does the code have like minimum density requirements? So, like, are you setting a minimum density that the development needs to achieve?
Yes, it does. So the density range is between 20 and 38 dph. So you can see that those densities respond. So this is the density plan, and those densities respond to the character areas.
Okay. One last question. Okay, well, that's a tricky one from Jennifer. She's asking how you would define the success of this master plan. I guess, how do you measure success in your company?
Personally, I think it's good to be recognised and to be able to present at this stage, but also good to see how the design code has been translated through the Reserve Matters design. Perhaps I should have included that as part of this presentation, but because we undertook a testing process that proved these parameters at the outline stage, it designs out, you know, hidden things that can change the design at the detailed stage. So everything has flowed through just as we wanted it from between outline and Reserve Matters. So I think that is the success for us, seeing how those ideas translate themselves into and manifest themselves. They go through detailed design and ultimately get built.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. And there might be other questions kind of popping into the chat, so feel free, obviously, to answer and respond to any of those. We are going to move to the next project, which is very different in character. And it is really the Lowline Commons, a kind of much more urban project. And the judges have identified the complexities for this project as kind of working across several local authorities with business improvement districts, multiple land ownerships, and also a very wide range of land uses. So they kind of recognized that it is effective in responding to its context and the different scales of intervention that were required. So it deals with a kind of very complex set of questions and challenges. So really looking forward to hear about this project from James Blower from Macfarlane Associates.
Thanks very much, Katja. So my screen should be being shared now. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is James Blower. I'm an urban designer from Macfarlane and Associates. We're a placemaking agency based in London Bridge, so actually in and amongst the sort of study area for this initiative that I'm going to present to you now. So the Lowline is a 2.5 kilometre railway viaduct that dissects the northern part of the London Borough of Southwark in central London, spanning areas such as Bankside, very, very diverse areas such as Bankside, London Bridge and Bermondsey. The Lowline was a strategic sort of a concept strategy, a term coined by ex-architect and local resident David Stevens, who you can see up in the top right here. He envisioned celebrating the fantastic heritage of these 150-year-old railway arches, one of the biggest built structures in the city, by creating a new walking destination from London Bridge, for London through Bankside, London Bridge and Bermondsey, connecting diverse neighbourhoods and communities, linking existing and new hubs of creativity along its course. So the concept was developed by a group of partners about 2010, 2011, and in 2019 ran an enormous international competition, open competition, which attracted about 100 entries from 35 countries. Brief was to create a green strategy under the umbrella of the Lowline, underpinned Victorian Railway viaduct, increasing environmental resilience and promoting.
Sorry, James, you're cutting out for me a bit. Is it just for me or is it for others as well?
My apologies for that. I'm hovering immediately above my laptop. So the Lowline partners, they're a group of organisations, a range of organisations, but this was kind of fundamentally pushed through by business improvement districts. So Team London Bridge, the Blue in Bermondsey, but first and foremost, Better Bankside. And it was our group of consultancies, designers, sustainability consultants and ecologists who devised the concept, the initiative, the Lowline Commons, which went on to win this RIBA competition. and was then funded by the Mayor's Good Growth Fund to the stage that it's at now. So our vision for the Lowline Commons was that through the implementation of green infrastructure, that this barrier, this viaduct, could become a green seam, stitching together a vast network of spaces that make up the urban fabric from Bankside to Bermondsey. So capitalizing on increased permeability and connectivity, and using the viaduct as a common and unifying element to tie these network of spaces together. So we are guided by key sort of regenerative design principles, biodiversity and ecology. So key to this, our approach is having a net positive impact and providing ecological gain to this part of London. So creating a multifunctional and connected network of nature-rich green stepping stones and building natural capital for Southwark. Climate resilience, so characteristic for its blue-green streets, the Lowline could become a catalyst for climate mitigation through green interventions elsewhere in London. And finally, creating a symbiosis between natural and human-built systems, triggering a wider change in responsibility and stewardship over the environment. So our approach to sustainability was kind of holistic, was integrated. As I was just mentioning, our key objectives were urban greening, supporting active lifestyles and enabling diverse activities. And you can see here that some of the issues we were trying to overcome were, this was a time when the world was emerging from the pandemic, which had kind of exposed lots of issues in urban environments that are still obviously apparent today, and below some of the outcomes that we strove to achieve. So as the Lowline dissects a huge array of character areas, we thought that to devise a strategy to bring this together as a cohesive whole, we needed to characterize areas based on character areas and design appropriate solutions for each. These also largely aligned with kind of the administrative boundaries of the business improvement districts. So not only do the areas that the Lowline, the viaduct pass through, are the character areas diverse, the types of spaces that surround them are also. This mosaic of streets we categorized based on varying opportunities for interventions and urban greening. And I'm going to come back to this a little bit more in detail shortly. So, you know, having these kind of lofty plans and dreams as part of this initiative would always ultimately remain that way unless we set ourselves measurable targets and goals that we could kind of move towards and benchmark ourselves against. So these targets were designed to ensure that nature is at the heart of the Lowline, and I'm sure that you'll all agree with me in saying that these numbers are very laudable. In a nutshell, integrating nature-rich streets along the viaduct has the potential to transform this area. Anyone who knows it knows that it's devoid of nature at the moment, largely. Creating sort of more welcoming spaces and forging the idea of an identifiable green seam, bringing people and nature together and ultimately contributing to London's status of being one of a national park city, the first national park city. So we looked to engage and bring along on the journey all stakeholders, you know, active stakeholder people and groups of people who are active along the railway corridor, to ensure that the benefits of the Lowline extend far into the future, you know, far beyond the days when I champion it as an individual and my consultancy are involved. It requires the support of the partners along its length, making sure that the benefits reach far into their communities. Translating sustainability into practice is a way of encouraging a shift in mindset, challenging the status quo by demonstrating the potential of green infrastructure. a truly regenerative approach. So this plan shows that the sort of wealth of activity that was already was already going on and continues to go on in the area. So our intention through the development of this wider strategy was to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts, binding the impetus and the passion from these local organizations, these great local scale tactical initiatives under one strategic umbrella, offering stakeholders a guide to planning, designing, and ultimately bringing to life projects within the umbrella of the lowline. Shared action and engagement by a different range of stakeholders, creating a positive environment for shared benefit. So it's all well and good having these targets that I was mentioning earlier, but you know, how do we propose to actually implement them? So following all our contextual analysis, we developed this toolkit that you see in front of you. The intention is that this toolkit can be applied on a kind of sliding scale, depending on the nature of the space. The toolkit is meant to be an enabling framework for collective action. You know, it's a powerful unifier, a bank of inspiration for local stakeholders to draw from. It's not meant to be prescriptive in any way, but a springboard for creative ideas, merely tools that can be adapted for place-specific solutions. So here you see how we envision the application of the toolkit in a range of spaces. So I'll just flick through these as I speak. The physical characteristics of each space, of each scale of space, offer different opportunities for people, nature, and enterprise to flourish. So scale will have an important influence, of course, on how our interventions are delivered. So sense of enclosure being a key one, space and priority for vehicles and parking, and of course environmental factors like sunlight and shade. So you can see this key on the right, which indicates, you know, how we envision the toolkit which you saw on the previous page being applied in each of these spaces. So next steps. The work undertaken so far in developing this initiative and toolkit articulates the values and the spatial design components that transcend the various initiatives, potential sites, and, you know, our focuses as a design team. This report, sitting currently at stage 2, sits as part of a suite of research and strategic reports, and is in fact included in SUDC policy, which provide guidance and an evidence base to inform its future implementation. These studies are a kind of critical resource, really, and an enabling framework, a kind of springboard for ideas for all of those, for everybody committed to transforming the low line and you know, the immediate context, this part of London, from a piece of transport infrastructure acting as a barrier to a robust green corridor which brings together these diverse neighborhoods. Taking the thoughts and designs from this report to something tangible and real is the ultimate goal for all of us. For this to meaningfully benefit the community, it requires a robust engagement strategy to discuss the vision with local stakeholders and devise a shared plan for implementation. So I'd like to just close by saying that we really think this is a truly regenerative, you know, truly unique, bottom-up participatory regenerative initiative, by the people, for the people, and with the people, inclusive for all, but importantly, making new places for people and nature to thrive.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for talking us through it. It's kind of truly diverse and complex project. And again, I ask everybody to put your questions into the chat. I will start off with one question, again, that came from the judges' comments. And I mean, you've talked already a little bit about, you know, the delivery mechanism. So the challenge is lots of great ideas, and as you say, kind of toolkit and a springboard for inspiration. So how does this become reality? And I was wondering, there's so many different partners involved, isn't it? Network Rail and the local authorities and private landowners. Have you had conversations with all of those, and how was this kind of received, and are they ready to kind of implement, and how?
That's the $1 million question, Katja. Yeah, we've been talking to the stakeholders, and ultimately some more than others are on board, and I won't mention any names about who those are, but it does require buy-in from each of them, you know, the kind of key stakeholders, if you like, because of course with this kind of myriad of land ownership, it's impossible really for the vision that we have for the entirety of the railway corridor to be transformed in one go. But there have been lots of, I might just flick back and show you lots of kind of smaller initiatives. It's one in the top right, which is Holyrood Street. In fact, just about a couple of 100 meters from where our offices are based, which was a sort of one of the business improvement districts pushed forward. So, you know, it's been a huge success story. This kiosk space, it was a leftover piece of land which has been transformed and into a real kind of hub for the local community. I mean, that's it on a summer's evening, people out enjoying drinks after work. That was a Team London Bridge initiative. So along the length of the corridor, there are lots of small things happening, and that's great to see. And they're acting as catalysts for further regeneration and ultimately encouraging the other stakeholders who are big organizations. You know, they're harder to move, they're harder to persuade. You know, encouraging them to also to get involved more, because you know, this is a win-win for everyone. So it's, I suppose the kind of decentralized concept is both, it's great, the great thing about the low line and the kind of hardest thing about the low line, because there's no kind of one, you know, organization leading it forward. But that's what's exciting about it. It's interpreted in different ways, and it's you know, it kind of coming forward in varying degrees at varying points along the low line.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That was a very long-winded way of answering your question, I'm afraid.
That answers my question. And I think it's kind of, I mean, you know, we are based in this area as well, and walking around it, seeing the transformation. So it's kind of really good. And I must admit, like, that railway doesn't seem to, it cuts through all the urban fabric. I still get confused constantly in the area, crossing under the railway, and you know, it would be a great piece of work if that comes forward, connecting all those different dots.
Absolutely. One of the, I was just going to say, within the kind of, under the sort of umbrella of the low line, just to sort of give a greater understanding of this, the initiative which I just presented is kind of one strand of it. So this is the kind of greening, the green infrastructure strand of the low line. There are also, there's a movement strategy as well, which involves, you know, sort of punching through some of the arches to create better permeability. That's another of the strands. And then there's the final strand is about installing these kind of prefabricated modular corrugated units into the spaces themselves, which are really easy to sort of put together and mount, easy and cheap, which will then allow local businesses to you know, use these spaces at very cheap rates. So yeah, it's a kind of cohesive strategy when you look at it all entirely.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of questions. One is about you know, they're businesses, they're stakeholders, landowners, but they're also residents. So have you thought about the kind of almost, you know, giving the residents a kind of right to green, and so they kind of do their part of it? And then there was another question, how have you dealt with the naysayer or the lack of chronic resource shortage for public realm and other strategic public works?
Yeah, I can take the first one. There's as I just flick back to this page because it's amazing actually when you see that the amount of work, the amount of initiatives that are going on and have been going on for a long time. Some of you here might know about some of them. Yeah, the champions of each of these initiatives are different. You know, some of them are local non-profits, some of them are groups of residents within you know, council estates who just wanted to make their immediate environment much more pleasant to be in. So there's a, you know, I talk about you know, binding this impetus together. There is already the will there of these people, of these groups to be involved and to create a nicer place to sort of live and work and be in. So I hope that answers that question. And the chronic lack of resources, yeah, I think there's probably no kind of shying away from the fact that you know, the council aren't going to be the people to push this through. But there's this, and I again flick back to the lowline partners. You can see there are other organizations that do have greater financial backing and whose interest it might be to engage with us as a team to bring the low line, you know, certain initiatives under the umbrella of the low line forward, because ultimately it kind of increases the value of their asset. I'm going to leave it up to you to work out who I'm talking about here, but you know, there is, I think there is always kind of money somewhere for this kind of stuff. It might not come all at once, but you know, that's fine. The way that we've set this initiative up is that it trickles in, and you know, into one initiative, which then catalyzes another, and over time the area changes and improves. Yeah. So I don't think any of us envision that there needs to be immediate buy-in from everyone and money up front.
Okay, and I guess, I mean, there's another one last quick question, and you know, you can see them in the chat as well and reply separately. Is about ongoing maintenance costs, so always a concern as well, and whether that was kind of, I guess, discussed and dealt with in one way or the other. Yeah,
I know that the business improvement districts do a kind of a relative amount of maintenance in these areas already. Of course, what we're proposing would increase that. So I think their involvement, you know, they are very much on board with this, but you know, their involvement is key. But I think often, you know, with public realm, there's and perhaps I'm being sort of idealist about this, but you know, I think by creating nice environments for people to be in, you kind of create stewardship, this kind of sense of stewardship and ownership. And as I said, you know, there's already a huge amount of local scale tactical work kind of going on. You know, residents, local organizations who are really interested in improving the area, interested and passionate about improving the area. You know, so creating a nicer environment, you're likely to, for them, you know, you're likely to kind of encourage them to help somewhere in the maintenance of that. But again, perhaps I'm being idealist about that.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being idealist. We have to have some of that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, at this
otherwise
stage,
we never change things.
Yeah, and ultimately, this still sits as an initiative. It's awaiting. It's kind of stalled as a stage 3 report, having won multiple awards. It's won the NLA overall award, the planning award, and a pineapple award actually earlier this year. So there's clearly impetus behind it. But if and when there's more money for us to sort of advance it to a stage 3 report, then we get more into the sort of granular and work out the nuts and the bolts.
So it's really watch the space and come and visit this area and see the improvements over time. So thank you, James, for the presentation.
Apologies for the signal.
That's okay. I think we sorted it out and we could all hear you clearly.
Right.
And so now we're moving to the third presentation and the last shortlisted project from Proctor Matthews, and it is Riverside, Sunderland. And the judges mentioned that, recommended that it's a long-term vision for regeneration of both banks of the river. It really converts an existing river backside into new city frontage, and has a kind of strong identity and links well to the industrial past. So let's hear from Andrew about the project a little bit more in detail.
Oh, okay. So this is Riverside, Sunderland. Quite an amazing project set right in the heart of the city, where there's quite a lot of vacant land. I mean, the overriding ambition for Riverside, Sunderland really was to create a sort of internationally recognised city centre development, but also to think, which I think is sometimes unusual, to think over a very long period of time about what kind of environment 21st century living could be in an older industrial city like Sunderland. And so you can't really realise these projects without mentioning the incredible ambition of the client here, which is Sunderland City Council. This work was undertaken alongside Faulkner Browns, and who looked in the central business district, and also Camlins, who were part of the team, because there's major green infrastructure here. So the sort of headlines were innovation and research around sustainability. Sunderland wanted this to be, as far as possible, a net zero carbon development. They wanted us to draw on the local history of Sunderland and to make a development that was about the context of this place and not a sort of ubiquitous sort of regeneration sort of project. Placemaking was really high on the agenda. How do we make an urban environment for the 21st century which is about community and people and not about cars, even though we know cars will be a part of the future in one form or another? And how were we to connect communities that have been severed by the industrial nature of the weir that runs right through the centre of this site, and create a completely different set of relationships between neighbourhoods that really haven't existed for a very long time? This slide I think is quite interesting because, and we use it quite a lot, it's I think as relevant to suburban areas as it is to city areas. People live in houses, but where do the houses live? If they are homeless, then all we're left with is typical endless, featureless suburbia. And that's sort of, we always kind of think about that when we're trying to think about context and placemaking and the relevance of the sort of cultural heritage, industrial heritage, particularly here of this place. When you go back to 1768, what the weir was this verdant gorge of probably broadleaf woodland. You can see what it was like actually further west as you move up the river into the countryside. And this would have been an incredibly wooded valley right down to the sea running through the centre of the city, or the town as it was at that time. And of course, 100 years later, we see on the right, 1852, this amazing industrialization of the city, where in many ways both sides of the city turned their back on the river because the river became so industrial and filthy, and it was sort of no-go area with coal drops that most people would have not really gone to or known about living in the neighborhoods. And there's a very peculiar thing happens when you do a figure ground down there on the left. You get this quite unusual city grain, which we've not seen actually in cities before. And when you draw a drawing like this, it tells you something about the morphology of the place. But what it also tells you is there's some unique things going on in terms of building typology that make up streets and characters that are really quite unique to Sunderland, and also I should say unique to the sort of broader northeast of England. Down on the right is the beginnings of our explorations of how you make interventions onto the river. These two historic images I think are interesting. They show what the industrial river was like, but they also show this amazing topography, 30-meter gorge down into the river, onto the riverside, and the kind of industry of coal drop yards that were occurring onto the river, which the only industry would have occupied, and then the glass works and ceramic works that would sit up on the hillside, and the silhouette that was created of the city right above you when you were down on the river. So the silhouette is really important, I think. So this is the subject area of our site. Sheepfolds is the neighbourhood. To the north, on the northern bank of the river, Farringdon Row, the Vaux site, which is presently under construction, is the first phase. The Central Business District, that's also partially under construction. And then this River Gorge, and the slow return, now that industry has gone, the slow return of this kind of natural landscape back to the River Wear that we would have seen 200 years ago. So if you descend into the river now, you're beginning to see that nature is taking hold again. So it's just some facts. This is 33 hectares of land, of which nearly 20 hectares are available for development. We want to be, Sunderland want this to be a carbon neutral development. They want to pioneer modern methods of construction and new technologies. There's to be 1,000 new homes here, schools, nurseries, more than 1 million square feet of modern office accommodation, some of which is currently under construction. The City Hall is currently under construction. There will be a culture house. There's the development of a life sciences building. There's this amazing landscape. There's the need to connect walking and cycling from our site down to the sea. And there is the opportunity to think about new infrastructure that can connect both sides of the river. So here we are. Here's a view of the river, and you can see that even people living, when we consulted them in Sunderland today, few people go down to the side of the river because it's always been felt as a no-go industrial area. And even today, there is that sense that not many people go down to the riverside. And yet there cannot be many cities in Europe that can sport such an amazing gorge running right through the centre of their town, and the opportunities that offers for health and well-being and the greening of a city on into the future of this century. So connections, incredibly important. The city connections, these neighbourhood connections across and down to the river. And then the site connections, these neighbourhoods that we're looking at, Vaux, Farringdon Row and Sheepfolds, all of which nestle alongside the edge of the gorge looking down into the river. And when you get to the edges of the gorge and stand on the top, the views up and down the weir are absolutely spectacular. We had a number of giggles among the audience when we were consulting residents of Sunderland, suggesting that they had something akin to an Italian hill town. And it wasn't until they walked out and saw for themselves just how special this was as a place that they began to understand that there was some really amazing possibilities for the future of city living here in the heart of Sunderland. Sometimes it takes eyes from another part of the world to come and explain to people living in a place just how special it is. So here's the escarpment edge narrative diagram that we created. It starts to think about the connections and strategic views across to headlands and across from the Stadium of Light, which is where obviously Sunderland Football Club is stationed, the city centre here at the bottom, the existing bridge across the river, and how we might take really a great advantage about re-establishing a silhouette and a built form along both embankment edges. So here's the edge condition of the escarpment shown in yellow here on the right, and the site plateaus that are part of our site area that we are to consider development on. And so an early master plan begins to work out how you can not only physically connect these neighborhoods across the river, but also how you can visually connect them, and how we can take advantage in the new neighborhoods of this new way of connecting landscape and living environments back to this city water lung that runs right through it. And so strategic connections involve a new High Line bridge, which is funded, which runs from the City of Light into Sheepfolds on the north bank, and will bring pedestrians right down into the central business district and Vaux, the new housing development, and into the city centre. So this will be the first time ever that a bridge of that magnitude has connected north and south of Sunderland together. And then as part of the new Riverside Park, which has been designed by Camlins, which sits as a green lung in the middle of all of this, is a low level green bridge down at the lower level, which takes you across the river and connects you into all of the cycle and pedestrian networks down to the riverfront, to Roker over here, and then back in the citywide network to the south. So these two bridges, the Green Bridge and the High Line Bridge, are crucial parts of infrastructure that will be funded by Sunderland to connect the new neighbourhoods together. And this is the built edge diagram, and we're beginning to think about how the buildings that sit directly on the edges of the river have a different morphology, different character, create a silhouette on both sides of the river, and how markers begin to address wayfinding, but also then how in the hinterland of those developments, how they actually begin to respond to adjacent neighbourhoods. So this is an early model which begins to show those strategic connections. We already have an existing pedestrian bridge across what's called Galley's Gill, which is another valley up here, connecting Farringdon Row over on this side to the development that's currently on site of Vaux here. I hope people can see my cursor. Okay. The low level green bridge, and then the high level bridge that takes you to the City of Light. And then you can see as markers what we call peel houses, which I'll explain in a minute, that sit along the edge and at night would begin to sort of show this silhouette and light this edge of the river that's never been occupied really by homes. So over on the left is the further refinement of the master plan. It shows you all of those land areas and the different communities that can be created, and how lungs of landscape are actually threaded up through Galley's Gill here underneath the existing bridge and up to the Stadium of Light, but also how the structure of the developments we're talking about, this has been the subject of design code on Farringdon Row, talk about how grain and character and silhouette can be developed to maintain that idea for the edge of the river. The drawings, sketch drawings on the left, then begin to demonstrate how architectural language, which is derived out of the topologies of Sunderland, can begin to deliver this amazing silhouette on the top of the cliff edge, particularly for people walking down on the riverside edge here, and even at the lower riverside edge along here. This is the 30-meter drop. And it's not just about housing. As I said at the beginning, this is a mixed use community, and Sunderland are as conscious about bringing community, civic, cultural and business life back into their city centre as they are attracting people to come to live here, and to re-energize inner city living, if you like, for our century. So it's really, that diagram gives you a clue about just how mixed use the development is. An early decision was taken to supply both the business district here and the housing on this side of Vaux, Farringdon Row and Ayres Quay with parking in a central parking barn, which is sitting here. And this is being built by the council. This will provide parking both for business people and for people living in these neighbourhoods. And it means that it enables us immediately to think about high density in a completely different way, because it allowed us to think about a public realm that is really about people. It also means that we can future-proof things like charging and energy generation for electric vehicles in the future. So this is a really bold move by the council to say, let's take cars out of all of this, and let's make this the future of our city one about people and families and pedestrians and not cars. So here's a bit more detail about how we were generating the silhouette along the city edge, creating this city edge promenade, this river edge promenade to the Vaux development. This is currently on site, connecting into existing bridges, delivering sort of belvederes that give the people opportunities to sit and take in the view. And another diagram showing how not only if we layered, rather than traditional developments which attempt to developments, if you like, that attempt to align buildings along edges to maximize views for only those that can afford a frontage, we were concerned about how the idea of a silhouette could afford views to properties that sit on the inner edges of the development, through and between buildings. And so there is this layered idea of development on the edge and not one continuous wall. And from the view on the right, you can begin to see how that same model is building that layered silhouette. This is a figure ground showing how higher density development was working for Vaux, with Mews development sitting on both sides, a promenade along the river edge. This is the viewing pergola or belvedere, and conscious of the environment here. The wind blows a lot in Sunderland, and this can be pretty inhospitable in the wintertime. So these are quite sheltered environments for the groups of houses and apartments that sit around them. And then a more detailed plan. And although this particular site is being built at the moment, nevertheless, all of the neighbourhoods were tested to this level of detail. And as I was saying earlier, when you drill in to look at the context of Sunderland, then you see across Sunderland and across the northeast, these fortified peel houses, which are unique to that part of the world. And in Sunderland, the yard house, which made up that grid of streets that you saw in the early figure ground. And then the Wearside maisonette, houses that look like houses but happen to be maisonettes, are quite unique to this part of the world, and they create quite an interesting urban place. So we were anxious to reinvent these topologies for our century, and for the topologies that we were developing and using for the development. So here's a diagram. This is a nice little puzzle, but it enables you to think about how cities are layered. And in a sense, this elevation then allows people to see through this silhouette. And so there's this layered approach that is wonderful if you're living in the development, but also produces this amazing silhouette when you're looking the other side of the river across. And then a very powerful frontage to the Riverside promenade, but entrances up into houses that have double fronts. This is the longer elevation. We're working now in detail with Mawson Kerr, who have elements to design within the master plan that we've created. This is bringing variety to the scheme, and it's been a really great collaboration with that local practice. And so this is our take on a peel house, and this is Mawson Kerr's take on the peel house at the other end. And then how the master plan and the development we're working up deals with urban threshold. How do we take thresholds that are important, that give people a psychological sense that they're moving from one place to another in a city, and that you're moving from a principal thoroughfare, busy thoroughfare, into a quieter environment that might be something which is about the residents that live there. So through historic devices reinterpreted in our development, how we give people a sense that they're moving through a spatial hierarchy that supports the kind of living that we're looking for.
And can I ask you to draw your presentation to a close, because there are lots of questions coming in.
Oh, I'm drawing it to conclusion. So I'm just finishing on a few CGIs. This is Ayres Quay and the New River Promenade, looking down into the weir when the tide is in, with a Peel House at one end. This is the new square at Vaux, People's Square, which has got cafes and some small business space. Another view from Farringdon Row, looking across the existing bridge here that connects in to the Vaux Peel. And then the new High Line Bridge, which is bringing you back, which is taking you towards the Stadium of Light, you can see up on the left, and the housing that sits on sheepfolds. And then down in Camlin's new regenerated Riverside Park. And I finish on the sort of aerial picture of all of those neighbourhoods sat down in the existing landscape of Sunderland. Thank you. Sorry, Katja.
Don't worry, that's fine.
You give an architect 10 minutes and they'll take an hour. You know that.
I know.
Especially me. Sorry.
No, and it's great, and there are kind of really good questions coming in as well, and people want to know more about it. And the first question is coming from Jenny, and it's really about what measures were proposed to take account of flood risk, even if the banks are engineered, and were there proposals for increasing habitats within the river itself?
The answer to those questions is yes. Obviously, flood risk doesn't really exist because we're so high above the river's tidal reach, even with the storm reach, that the natural topography allows us to sit well above any concerns about flooding. The biodiversity is being massively increased by Camlin's in the way they're thinking about the new Riverside Park. I mean, biodiversity is returning to this part of the river naturally, to be honest, but I know they've undertaken surveys and are thinking about how they might enhance that. What I didn't say was they're also including a quite significant allotment garden in that landscape for the people that live in the surrounding neighbourhoods. So there's quite a lot of work being done by the city around biodiversity, and around biodiversity not just of the parkland, but the biodiversity of our developments, our high density development.
Okay, thank you. The other questions relate to also the remote parking and how that will impact on the accessibility of the housing, and I guess in terms of future-proofing them. So disabled residents, shopping deliveries, furniture removals, all those kind of elements where you still need a car or a van. And
yeah, so the current bit that's being developed, Vaux, has drop-off places for people to drop, and it has drop-off for things like Amazon deliveries and things. Within the development, there is also parking for those with mobility issues. So accepting that people who have mobility issues can't park remotely, there is parking on site for that user group. And there's also conversations around smart technology infrastructure about could the new car barn incorporate a mobility hub, but also a parcel drop-off hub, so that we distribute across the neighbourhoods Amazon parcels and other parcels through more green, maybe electric bike technology, and we don't therefore have too many larger vehicles trying to move around what is actually quite a reasonably high density scheme. It's interesting though, when you take cars out of a project, higher density doesn't look like high density anymore, because suddenly all of the environment that you would have made available to cars is available to people.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the delivery, so is there a delivery partner to build the properties or sell them? And if so, are they carrying the principles of the remote parking through to the final design stages? And also related to that, can you talk a little bit more about the phasing and whether, for example, the bridges are supposed to come out of the development fund?
Yes, so Sunderland have level up funding and they know that they are the custodians. If you like, Sunderland are really the master developer. So they have acquired quite a lot of the land and they are creating design codes for the developments moving forward. They are putting in the smart infrastructure, they're putting in the bridges, and they're facilitating access to land parcels, as well as building alongside partners like Legal and General, the business space. They're also building a new city hall and a new culture house. The NHS, I believe, are part of the delivery of the new eye hospital. And Sunderland are building at the moment the car park. So when developers come forward, they will have space in the car park for their development, for their residents, to a certain ratio. So Sunderland is building the first phase of housing, which will be subject to an expo in 2025. And they will retain that as a rental, as a demonstration project, and show to other developers that they mean business in investing in the centre of their city. But other neighbourhoods then will be open to partner developers to come forward.
Okay, thank you. And one other question is about the sustainability and the energy strategy. I think you mentioned solar. Sunderland is a very windy place. Have you considered other kind of energy regeneration, wind turbines?
Yeah, well, solar is one of the major parts of it. All the homes are using, obviously, air source heat technologies. There is conversations about site-wide energy generation, but that's it's still being discussed.
Okay.
We are using modern methods of construction, and they are trying to drive down both carbon in use and carbon in construction. I mean, the green credentials for this project are very high indeed, which is to be fair to Sunderland, they've stuck to their guns around that.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you very much. I think that is all the questions. And I guess now we are coming to the point everybody has been waiting for. And I mean, not having been part of the judging, it's kind of as exciting for me as for all of you to hear about these projects. So the winner, the category winner for the large master plans as voted by the judging panel is Proctor Matthews River Sunderland.
Blimey.
Very well done.
Thank you.
And thank you for the submission. And the judges said that the high density mixed use master plan creates a new city frontage onto the river. It kind of is a bold vision and really shows how planning can be proactive. Planning in this case is aided by a successful bid. 25 million, I think, is going in there, but it shows what planning can deliver when properly funded and moving the agenda from reactive to proactive. And the design team has managed to push the boundaries of this project in a number of ways, from architecture, urban design to construction and digitization. So well done, and got our winner. And it was a difficult decision. All the projects are very different. I don't know how the judges kind of dealt with it, but very kind of difficult to compare all of them together. And as I said, I would really like to celebrate in person with all of you in Sheffield on the 12th and 13th of October at our National Urban Design Conference. And I hope to see you all there. And thank you for joining us and participating.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very humble. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Very strong competition, so that's fantastic.